Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone to another Culture First gathering. This session is titled Power Hygiene, Understanding Our Leverage and Responsibility at Work. My name is Jessie Jacob. I am our Senior Community Engagement Manager here at Culture Amp, running all 95 of our global chapters around the world. Today, you'll see a few of our chapter leads are here: Chris, Julia, Nia. So Tampa, New York, Freiburg, Germany, also running our Startups Europe chapter. So anyway, this is just an honor. Today, obviously, we're talking about power hygiene, this idea of exploring how do we care for ourselves as leaders to be responsible and effective conductors of power at work, and how do we become more aware of how we cause harm and how do we effectively leverage our power? And I think sometimes our heart-centered leaders, many of you, the people, we care so much about other humans, and we're constantly getting caught up in this idea of people pleasing. And so understanding how do we actually understand what is power, and how do we clearly articulate and redefine what is power? Because I think many of us have almost maybe a negative connotation of power. So we want to clear that up, clear the misunderstanding of what power even is, how we actually understand the blocks we have around power and ourselves and the way we use it, and then how we can effectively leverage our power to support us with our well-being, our mental health, our organizational effectiveness, and all of those good things. So today we're joined by Larissa Conte, which this has been an honor to collaborate with her, get to know her, and I'm so excited to bring her wisdom and her energy to this community. So Larissa is the founder and lead guide at Wayfinding. She started Wayfinding in 2016 to help leaders with enduring resources for embodying their sovereignty and following a life calling and deepening their practice of power that serves the whole. She is an internationally recognized leadership coach. Her insights on power source come from 20 years of studying power at work and applying it through her own lived experiences. She's a consultant, she's a coach, she's a healer, she's a regenerative designer, she's a rites of passage guide, she's a tracker. So I'm just so excited for her to bring her wisdom to you all. I have had an honor of getting to know her. I've learned so much from even just helping put together this gathering with you all, and I'm excited to continue to learn from her today personally. Yeah, this is what a treat this is. So Larissa, thank you so much for being here. I even wore this shirt today on theme, which is there's something beautiful about choosing yourself after spending so long doing the opposite. To me, it fits the theme of just the power that we give away to other people and the power we take for ourselves. So I'm excited to be here with you, and thank you so much for just even inspiring me to get here at this point. So, okay. So to start us off with who are we as a community? If you have been to a Culture First community, we always start with who we are, what do we stand for, and then how this all relates to what we're doing here today. All right, so what is the Culture First community? The community at Culture Amp is where global people leaders and change agents come together to be inspired by their peers and to ideate and share best practices to create a better world of work. We think of community living at all these different areas within Culture Amp. Obviously, we're here within the chapters program, but we also have our global flagship experience at Culture First Global. If you're not in our People Geek Slack community, I highly recommend it. There's 20,000 people in there sharing ideas and resources. We have a Culture First podcast. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out with some amazing articles and research and insights called The Geekly. And then we also have some field marketing events too called Geek Ups, and we have webinars and things like that. So who are we? We are a group of people around the world united in the shared belief that a better world of work is possible. What makes us different is we are willing to make this belief a reality. We have 5 core principles across all of our 95 global chapters, which are to foster belonging and acceptance. So we're all about creating environments where individuals feel like they can come and feel seen, heard, valued, and appreciated for just being themselves with their diverse experience and their diverse backgrounds. The second core principle is being willing to reflect and grow. If we're on this mission to transforming the way that we work, that starts with our organizations, and then actually that starts with us in as how are we contributing to this work environment, so being the change we want to see in the world. So understanding, this is perfect for what we're doing today, understanding our own power at work and how do we leverage that to be more effective. The third principle is having the courage to be vulnerable. So really understanding we wear all these masks at work all the time. So we're willing to take down this mask of like, I have X title at X company. Underneath all of that, we're just human beings. Like we're all fundamentally flawed. We have our things that we're all working on, but we are here to connect on a vulnerable level, and that creates more trust and psychological safety with one another. The fourth core principle is putting learning into action. We didn't want this to just be another place where you consume information, it goes in one ear and out the other. We want you to feel inspired to take action and commit to how you can actually change the workplace. And then the last one is connection inside, business outside. So in the context of this gathering, we're here to connect as human beings first and to do the work and be the change we want to see in the world and understand our power at work. And then if that leads to us doing business outside of the context of this gathering, that's awesome. But the primary purpose isn't just for networking alone. All right. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And one other thing before I hand it off to Larissa is there's a giveaway at the very end to a course that Larissa has on understanding the different types of power at work, and specifically how you show up to work with your own power. So hang out with us till the very end. We'll make sure we'll go through that giveaway. So handing it off to you, Larissa. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited. Let's get into it.
All right. Thank you so much, Jessie. And thank you everyone for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time and following your curiosity to come and show up. And so the first thing I want to know, because I like to be in conversation with you, I'm going to type a question in chat. And I love hearing where you are in the world. I love seeing friends and wayfinding alumni and like former colleagues, and then all of your new faces. And I want to keep learning about you through this experience as a conversation. So I'm going to paste a question into chat. I would love to know, what is the main curiosity calling you here today? Because the topic of power, so I'm going to talk a little while you choose to type in if you would like. It's an invitation, it's not an obligation. As you choose to type in, what is it? What are the wonderings that you have? What are the things that are lighting you up, potentially making you cringe, maybe that have been difficult that you've been working on? Because power, by the nature of what power it is, thank you, Chris. Are there blind spots I'm not aware of about power? Wonderful. That's a common one. Jessie, is it possible to want or have power without feeling guilty? Thank you for role modeling vulnerability with your question, Jessie Jacob. Leadership. If anyone else would like to add your questions, I invite them in. But before we begin, I just want to give so much permission. Can power be gentle at work? How can I harness my power with confidence? I hope as you see other people's questions come in, where are my own blind spots? How do I influence organizational structures where power dynamics feel like they're inhibiting people doing their best work? That's a common one. I hope as you read the questions that come in this group, that through these curiosities and through the conversation explorations we have today, you start to see a more beautiful world possible through a different relationship with power. So Chris Murchison, how power gets used by omission, by non-response, and other habits. Yes, it is as much what we are doing as what we forget to do or what we purposely don't do. And Marie, I want to learn more about commanding power versus demanding power. So beautiful. Okay, so as we begin, I'm actually going to invite you, this is an invitation, maybe in all sorts of different environments, but wherever you are, I invite you to send your awareness into your feet for a moment. And you can do that with your eyes open or your eyes closed as you wish. And to really feel the full weight of however much of your body weight is distributed on your feet. If you're lying down, it won't be much. If you're sitting, to feel the full contact, to feel your toes, to feel the balls of your feet, your arch, that outside edge of the foot, and your heel. And find the full distribution of your feet in the contact with the earth. Part of why we're doing this is to come into our bodies, because power is a sensation, it's not an idea. So we want to activate our sensing. And then from this place, with your sensing activated, again, I invite you to close your eyes, but you don't need to for this either. I am going to say a word. And when I say this word, I'm going to ask you to notice the first three things that come to your awareness. They could be images, they could be emotions, they could be colors, they could be embodied sensations. And don't judge whatever comes up, just let them flow, almost like water flowing by in a river. So I'll give you a test one first. So I'll get you all primed. So the first one I'm going to say is apple. This is just getting you primed. Just notice. Notice what happens in your body, your emotion, and your energy. And any images you might see. So that's our warm-up. And now we're going to get into it. So for this one, what comes when I say the word power? What are the first images, body reactions, emotions, or sensations you might be feeling? And to just take note of those. And we're creating so much space for this because these things often fly by quickly without our notice. So slowing down helps us see them. Next, I'm going to ask you to notice, again, images, sensations, emotions. When you think about the sun, and the ocean, and forests. And then when you have your noticings, come on back. And to compare that, we're going to be comparing that first group, the first reaction of like what came up with the notion of power, and then what came up with the images from nature. How did those affect your nervous system? Maybe it was similar, maybe it's different. And Jessie, I'd love to invite you to come off mute and share what's happening with that link. What are we going to do in that
link? Yes. Okay. So I just shared a link in the chat. I'm also going to share my screen if you would prefer to like scan this QR code, but we'd love to hear like what words, images, and body sensations came to mind when you thought of the word power. So again, you could use the link in the chat. You could scan this QR code on your phone. You could also go to slido.com and enter in this event code number. But please, I want to hear what came up for that first for the first prompt Larissa had around images, body sensations.
Country, president, white men, superhero, strength, anger, male, suits, leadership. My body straightened, greed was activated in my body. Muscle, imbalance. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Strength is getting more activation. Grr. Yep. Red. Golden aura energy. Beautiful. Beautiful. Froze. I got stiff. My shoulders relaxed. Sensed abuse. Felt stress. Relaxed shoulders getting bigger. So you'll notice as these things are coming in, most of the associations, anxiety, heat, stress, we have conflicted feelings about power in general. Wonder Woman, king, corruption. So this is a very mixed territory. And some of these things can be actively painful, actively traumatizing or activating to us, and others can be inspiring and can fill us with energy. So maybe that last one, participant typing, then we'll go over to the next one, Jessie.
Love it.
Great.
Okay, on to our, gotta stop sharing here to go to my next question. All right, next question. What images, words, body sensations come to mind when you thought of the nature scenes around the sun and the forest and the ocean? What came up for you then?
Warmth, in awe, happiness, peace, adventure, freedom, tree, earth, majesty, colors, calm, all encompassing, more peace, more calm, color, vastness, hot, relaxed shoulders, cool, peace, warmth, harmony, connection, easy. Empowerment, colors, big, strength, renewal, relaxation, home, beyond control. Beautiful. Possibility. That's a great place to wrap for there. Thank you all so much.
Man, beyond control, like hit me, whoever shared that one.
Thank you so much for participating. So I like to start this experience, this conversation about power hygiene, about our images and our associations, because we can have very fraught relationship with power. But the contrast of like what comes to mind when we think about power, and if our associations are with something like negative, harmful, or hurtful, we tend to not want or reject or like actively avoid or distance as much as possible things that we feel might hurt us. But then, as we saw with the sun and trees and oceans, there's a lot of like heart opening, a lot of being opening, a lot of like expansion, a lot of softening, a lot of relaxation, a lot of affinity, a lot of like yum, a lot of longing. And all of those things I named in nature are power, are representations of power too. Though we may not automatically think of them off the bat. So I'm starting here because for all the aspirations we hold at work, for all of our main concerns of if you're a leader, how to lead this changing workplace and the remote workplace, how to prioritize and maintain employee well-being and lead and expand our effectiveness as diverse, inclusive cultures, and and also excel at engaging and retaining organizational members, to being an individual at work and knowing I don't want to feel stress. I don't want to be burned out. I want to have my mental health intact while doing meaningful, fulfilling work and facing potentially economic uncertainty or competing demands as a parent or caretaker. And how do I feel safe and belonging and valued for my wholeness? All of those things at work can seem disparate, or at times like, is this even part of the same fabric? And in that sense of disconnection, what I want to offer is that every single thing we want at work and every single thing we want in life is connected to power, to how power works, to how power flows in our own beings and through life. And so this notion of power hygiene starts with, how do we get to clean up our associations with power and see it in a broader view so that we can conduct power more effectively, whether we're aiming to go for a promotion or to feel more safe or to get up on a stage and put forth the ideas we've been longing to share. It's all connected to power. It's all connected to power. This is my belief, that it's all connected to power, and you get to see whether that feels true for you. So as we start with noticing what are our associations and also our false beliefs about power, because our lack of understanding of power can lead us to believe like there's so much cultural coding and we've been exposed to so many forms of power abuse that we can automatically assume that power equals power abuse. And right off the bat, I'm just going to let you know that's not so. That's why we get the mixed bag in the word cloud. So if power is not power abuse, then what is power? And often then people can struggle with like, oh, but is power good or is power bad? And then we can get caught in like, well, I don't want to be bad and I don't really know what good power looks like. And so then again, this kind of like jerky, like sidestepping, leaning in, cringing, expanding, hot stove touching, I don't really know, embodiment feeling. So my hope is through this conversation to like help shed some of that so you can feel oriented in your own wayfinding and finding your own way of being powerful that feels good to your being and to all of life and how you show up. So we as heart-centered leaders first can struggle with power, not just because of the cultural programming, but often because we ourselves have experienced some form of power abuse or witnessed a loved one experience some form of power abuse. And that usually sits right at the taproot with our sense of purpose and our sense of calling to show up to steward a more inclusive, more human, more regenerative world of work. So the Culture AMP platform, the Culture First community, like all of us who gather under this banner to make the world of work more human, we can often share this taproot of like, I just want work to feel good. Like, why does it feel so bad sometimes? Part of it is how power has been conducted and how it has been assumed that it's okay to conduct it. And so then part of it of why it's important as leaders is when we understand power and when we make conscious, can often operate in our unconscious or our subconscious. When we bring it up into the front, then we can choose more effectively. So after all of that, what is power? In my experience, I define power as the capacity to move energy through systems. It is not force. It is not might. It is not control. So the capacity to move energy through systems. As an individual being, I move energy through my being. I move the life force through my being. The life force moves through me it animates my being. How do I steward the life force in how I care for my own body? How do I conduct the life force moving through me in how I speak, in how I love, in how I express, in how I create connection or disconnection? So the energy that we're moving through systems is first recognizing, oh, we're operating in nested systems. At work, we can often have a fragmented view because in our cultural worldview, we can have a fragmented view that like my personal self is here, and then like my family is here, and then work is here, and then my spiritual life or how I make meaning is here, and then society and nature over here, all just kind of these like floating realms that we jump from time to time. But the work that each of you is doing, I know this because this is like representative of the movement of making work more human, is revealing those things aren't separate, they're actually interconnected. They're interconnected. And so if we're conducting energy through all of those scales at once, when we show up in our wholeness at work, I show up in my heart, I show up in my head, I show up in my relationships, I show up in my mastery, I show up with my privilege, I show up in my spirituality, I show up in my artistry. Oh, and part of the path of power is taking responsibility for all of those dimensions of ourself that are in the room. So to go to like the next layer of power, and thanks for hanging with this, because I'm going to start bringing some visuals up that can help make it real too. But if power is the capacity to move energy through systems, and with all those word associations we saw in the Slido, we can choose consciously or unconsciously to direct that energy in different ways. And the ways that I have articulated it are, we can direct it as power that serves the whole. So that's connective power. It connects us. It maintains the connective nature of reality. We are independent. You know, this is an interdependent, connective existence. Or we can have shadow power, which disconnects, which causes harm, which feeds the illusion that we are disconnected, separate beings who don't depend on each other. You know, that like fragmented consciousness. So I frame it as power that serves the whole, generates benefit to self and others, and it tends connection. Whereas shadow power disconnects, it causes harm to self and others, and it feeds the illusion that we're fragmented. So like I use my body a lot. You may have already noticed this, but because power is embodied, it helps to see it sometimes. So here is my visual for you of how power that serves the whole and shadow power can show up. So power that serves the whole is a recognition of like, okay, we're not one, like we have sovereignty. So we are one in that we are interconnected, but we are separate beings. So we have sovereignty, we hold mutual regard for each other. We may not be exactly the same. We are actually most absolutely not exactly the same. We are beautiful in our difference and all of the different ways that we express our power, but we are not placing ourselves as either above or below in power that serves the whole. This is a very important part of it. But in shadow power, that fragmentation takes two forms. We can either view ourselves as above and better than the other person. So then if we're above and better, then we can like justify harming them, belittling them, being arrogant or self-righteous. Or we can view ourselves as below them and give our power away. So I call this power over and power given away. We can feel like victims. We can feel like we can't stand up. We can feel like the other person has all the control and we don't have any agency to do anything. So these two postures are the forms that all of us take. So I'm like pausing here and I'm coming in close because we all do both of these shadow forms, and we all have aspects of power that serves the whole, that expresses. Ooh, and I see some chats coming in. Let's see. a lot of shadow power happens on the subconscious level. Yes, it does. Oh, thank you so much. It happens on the subconscious level. So part of my work, part of this work is taking the things that are happening back here that are subtle and we don't even have language for often, and bring them into the conscious realm and be like, oh, I'm doing that. Like I do that. Like I'm doing that right now. Oh, I'm actually like, when I see someone else in my power, do I like get a little smaller and feel like worse about myself because of someone is expressing their mastery? So part of the work is noticing, wow, am I even doing it? What am I doing? So I'm going to share a visual. And I'm going to come back to the question, and we have a whole rich Q&A time. So you get to see, but I want to ground this in for people who are like, I want to know what is happening. So here, a way that this shows up. So these are those nested systems that I was talking about. These are the nested parts of ourselves that we bring to work. And you'll notice that power that serves the whole, as it expresses across all of the 5 realms, you can see that it has that connective nature. It has that enlivening nature. It has a generative nature. So whether that's when we inhabit our aliveness and our essence, or we come from recognition of our interdependence, or we prioritize relationships first and power with at work, or creating regenerative communities, nations, and land stewardship, or engaging ceremonies that empower, heal, and connect. Those all have a tonal character that's shared, even though they're different forms. And then you'll notice here with shadow power, this can show up as our ego. It can show up as depletion. It can show up as ways that we self-violate, not having boundaries. It can show up in relationships of codependence. At work, it can be as profit first and power over. In society and nature, it can be in the forms of colonialism, systemic oppression, extraction. And then in the realm of ceremony and meaning, charlatanism as ceremony for subservience. So we're going to take a pause in like me talking and words and concepts and braining, because again, we want to bring it back into your bodies. And I am navigating multiple windows as I drive over here. So part of this work and part of the recognition of what's happening in our subconscious is to catch it, to catch what's happening. So you notice in the beginning when I made a lot of space to slow down and us to come into our bodies, that because power, it's not a material thing that I can just point to. It takes countless forms. And so we need to slow down when we're working with things that are immaterial, but have material consequences. And it can often be easiest to see shadow power in other people. That's like always the easiest. You're like, oh, you're doing that thing. You're like being controlling, or you're railroading the meeting again because you want to be right. And like, hey, we've all done it. So part of this work is also really as one of my teachers used to say, de-shamifying the fact that we have shadow responses. It's just part and parcel of being human. So what if we're not bad people if we express our shadows? It's actually inevitable, and it's how we learn. And that shadow power is different from power abuse. They're on a spectrum, they're on a gradient. But having more spaciousness in self, and then building the possibility of what if we have like generative community around power and how we grow into our own beings, into our beauty, and into like the recognition of our vulnerability, and that we're just going to keep learning and we get to repair. So coming into your bodies, this notion of shadow power, I particularly would like you to notice in your own body, again, you can do this with eyes open or eyes closed. It's an invitation if you want to participate. What is one indicator in your physical body? So it can be someone named like tight shoulders before. That would be an example in the physical body. It could be an emotive state like doubt or worry. Or it could be like a sensation that's like, I get really hot, or I start like sweating and start stumbling over my words. What are indicators to you in your being of when you go into giving your power away? That particular type of shadow power. When you start feeling less than. And as you name these indicators, that this is a process of love. This is not a process of judgment. It's a process of knowing how we respond so that when the response comes, we can catch the response before it tumbles into a storm system. And it's okay if you're noticing, I'm like aware of this pattern. I'm aware that when I give my power away, I tend to keep giving it. I tend to keep over giving. I tend to help other people instead of asking. And then my next question for you while we're here is, if you take any one of those things that's happening in your being, it might be like, especially if it's a body response, what could you do to soften and ease and like address the longing that's in that response? So if you're tightening, the antidote for that is usually relaxing. If you're rushing, the antidote for that is usually pausing or slowing down. If you have a very mean critic inside, like so many people do, myself included, the interrupting that voice and extending yourself love. And this may be new for some of you, or this may be like decades of life practice that you've been flexing. And yet, the most advanced practitioners, continues to get into the subtle realms. Like, oh, there's that thing, like that catch in my throat. It feels like, I need to honor it. Like I'm not saying something. And instead of just clamming up and letting like the whole system get wound and tightened and more protective, to just like pause and catch it right there and be like, oh yeah, I'm doing that. Because when we behave over, when we protect over these responses, it's like a log jam causing a dam in the flow of our generative power. The like forcing, the tightening, that tightening creates erratic flow. So that's like one of the big keys, is that power that serves the whole often comes from relaxing and softening. Whereas like shadow power, it's almost like a tight canyon and there's a lot of rocks in there and water is like working to find its way around. So coming back to this, it's a sensation. It's not. right. So now we're going to come back. We're going to do a little bit more in the like diagram brain realm. I invite you to keep staying in touch with your body. And we're going to have a big, rich Q&A section where your voices get to come and we get to make sense of this together. And like before we go to the slide, let's just take 3 breaths. I don't know if you just heard my shoulder pop, but it was pretty loud. So maybe your body also gets to relax. And that was from me like acting out tight. In this breathing. Also, what if we just get to take a moment to extend active love toward ourselves? In the realm of seeing power for heart-centered leaders, it can often be a place to then exert shame and judgment on ourselves for not being better. And you, my friends, are all enough exactly as you are. We are all in process. And that we learn about ourselves in order to compassionately have acceptance and then engage transformation, not to belittle ourselves into growth. And last real talk piece is like the shadow is uncomfortable. It can bring up feelings of disgust in ourselves in seeing our own shadow. Or shame. And the shame and the disgust are actually also mechanisms of the shadow to keep us from looking at it. Because if we say like, oh, hey, I'm doing that thing where I'm judging myself or where I judge other people, if we then immediately feel shame about it, then back in shadows. So it's slippery in that way, but it's also one of our greatest inbuilt teachers to help raise our awareness. So in the beautiful kaleidoscope of power that exists in life, my team and I have identified that there are 30 types of power that show up most commonly at work. So this helps us get away from the notion that power is one thing and it's either good or bad, and you either have it or you don't. Every single one of you here has expressions of power. And it's like pretty confident to say you all have expressions of shadow power, power that serves the whole, because we all do as humans. That is our practice in leadership, to amplify our expressions of power that serves the whole and diversify our expressions of power that serves the whole, and recognize where and how we cause harm to ourselves with this type of power and to others with that type of power. So each of these forms of coming back to power that serves the whole and shadow power can express in these 30 types of power that we found show up most commonly at work. And there are a couple that you're just gonna be like, oh yeah, we talk about those types of power all the time. So some like high notes to help orient you here, because it can be, it can feel like, wow, these are a lot of things. Yes, it is. So first, when we talk about power at work, when people say power, or when they say they wanted power, or you did it for power, or I don't have power, people mostly mean in here under organizational, the organizational realm, positional power, decision-making power, maybe network power, and then resource power, which is what we say instead of like money, because money is just one type of resource. So if you don't have the most decision-making power in your organization, or the most positional power, or the command of the greatest budget, guess what? You have all these other types of power happening that are available to you that can be expressed as power that serves the whole or shadow power. So for example, a type of power that is often overlooked for heart-centered leaders and like in the workplace in general, is caretaking power. So heart-centered leaders often are really great at expressing caretaking power as power that serves the whole. I'll help you out. How can I champion you? Oh my God, your family member just died. Like, can I be an ear to listen and a heart to embrace your heart? Another aspect, though, for heart-centered leaders is that we can have shadow around our caretaking power. Oh, I'm going to give and I'm going to give and I'm going to give and I'm going to give to my own detriment and not maintain my own boundaries. Or we can see things come up around, for example, like another power dynamic that can happen is when people talk about the notion of imposter syndrome. That's not having trust in our own mastery. So you have skills that you have developed. And when we don't trust our mastery, that is the power given away form of mastery power, for example. Then, to our amazing, like every amazing colleague who is actively standing for diversity, equity, and inclusion work, becoming status quo in how we work and how we function as a society is raising awareness of privilege power. And then you might see some that you don't understand what the words are. You might be like, alchemy power. I have no idea what you're talking about. I use that word to describe the ability to transform things from one state into another. So people who are mastered facilitators who can transform a stuckness in a group and get them out of conflict or out of swirl and into clarity and into connection. That's a capacity of alchemy power. You also might be like, whoa, what is erotic power doing on here? Yeah, well, we're whole people, we're erotic beings, and the denial of that doesn't work very well. It's actually, and hence like sexual harassment as a thing at work. But we know what like the shadow power version of it looks like, but we often don't know what the power that serves the whole version of it looks like. So I hope that in seeing all these dimensions, it helps create curiosity in you of like, wow, where am I most expressed? Where do I see myself in this? And then where feel like blind spots? So this beautiful question raised by Chris Murchison in the chat earlier of what am I not doing? So if we are whole beings and we flourish in wholeness, in our own selves, we actually experience harm when we have an unwatered, uncultivated aspect of our power constellation. So if we are not expressing play, there's like a dryness in our spirit and our hearts that longs to like bubble and just be lighter. Or if we don't really have deep relationship to place and we don't like know where our place is, and we're not necessarily enacting shadow power there, but we just don't cultivate it, that impacts us with like a dullness and it's a type of like numbness that's there. It's an absence. So absence can impact us as much as active shadow. And then in relationship and as leaders, in this study that came out that 70% of someone's mental well-being, mental health, is impacted by how their manager treats them. So if we have blind spots in our power constellation, our blind spots are the places that we often cause hurt and harm to other people as much as the places where we actively express shadow power. So again, this is not a way to like shame or blame ourselves. It's to recognize, oh, heart-centered leaders often don't fully claim their gifts. So when you see this, you can be like, yes, like I'm expressing I'm expressing power that serves the whole in these beautiful ways. God, like I'm totally not appreciated for how playful and caretaking I am, and like the power of sensing that I bring along with my mental power, and the fact that I bring ceremony and ritual in to create meaning and community. That's one claiming this work. And another is to know, oh, how am I harming myself and how am I harming others? Because with awareness, then we can get to every single thing we desire. Every longing, every aspiration brings us into acceptance and expansion into power that serves the whole, and to like reckoning and working with and digesting and releasing our shadow patterns. Now's a great time to breathe again. And maybe also just notice like, oh, what's happening in your body now that we're talking about power and exploring it in these different ways, in contrast to the very first associations that you had with the word power and what you input into the slide. Yeah, cool. Thank you, Seema. These examples are really helping these concepts land. That's right. Okay, I'm going to give one more example, and then we're going to come into Q&A time. So I'm actually going to read you definitions as we define them, because these things show up behaviorally. So I'm going to define one of the types of power, which is sensing power, which is often an unconscious or unacknowledged mastery area for heart-centered leaders, because to be like strong in relationship and strong in caretaking and strong in connecting the dots, you have to be good at sensing, which is a different form of intelligence than intellect. So power that serves the whole, these are some of the behaviors that can demonstrate power that serves the whole for sensing power. The unexpected and unknown are exciting to me. I trust and I use my sensing power to effectively navigate the unknown, often experiencing a sense of magic in this process. I use my sensing power to build connection and to intuit the subtle and emerging dynamics, whether in a relationship, a team, or a space, to bridge my own desires and with what life is calling out of me in service. So that's an example of how it can show up behaviorally. Versus, here are 3 examples, 2 or 3 examples each, for what does sensing power in the shadow form of power given away look like. I don't use or have access to my sensing power. So like denial of something existing can be it. Or I don't trust my sensing as a way of knowing. So that can be like a disconnection from our embodied intelligence. Or I feel overwhelmed by how much I can sense. Like it can feel cacophonous, it can get so loud, which many heart-centered leaders have felt many times in these last 3 years. And then examples of power over. For sensing power, this is shadow power of power over. I have a constant need to have a plan, to know what's going on, or to try and control every single outcome. So again, you see that like gripping nature. Or I don't value or pay attention to feelings, whether mine or others. It's a form of denial. And or I feel numb. Severing of the mind from the body. And so those things can show up where it's like, because the mind can justify anything. The body is another form of intelligence that can guide like, oh, is there aliveness there? Or is there stuckness there? Or if you're a practitioner of agile methodology or responsive organizations, the constant sensing for tension and how to address tensions in an organizational body comes from our sensing power. So if you're trying to foster teal organizations, if you're familiar with that concept, you must develop mastery at sensing power. So those are just some of the applications of how we bring this to light. All right. Jesse, how do you feel about us going into Q&A now?
Please, I would love it. I want to hear from everyone. I'm like, I have pages of notes that I'm like, I can't wait to hear what everyone else is thinking right now. Holy smokes.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you all. And I'm going to momentarily remove Spotlight because when Spotlight is on, I can't see your faces. For those of you who are on video, I would like to see your faces. And for those of you who are off, that is fine. I hope you're well. Um, yeah, what are the main questions bubbling? And let's, Jesse, for protocol for questions, do we want to type them in chat or
Larissa, I'm honestly feeling like we need to have like a few people just share their like takeaways
Right.
so far and then get into questions, because I'm just like so curious like what's resonating for some folks and like how they're applying it to their own scenarios, but would love to just like open it up.
I love that. Awesome. Do you want to take the lead and call on people?
Does anyone feel comfortable sharing, or whether it's in the chat or coming off mute? Sinyi, I've like loved everything that you've been putting in the chat. I especially want to hear from you if you would feel comfortable sharing with the group.
Sure, Jessie. Thank you. And also thank you for pronouncing my name right. It's rare. Yeah, I would first say thank you for this event, Larissa, for you to unpack or share with us the definition of power. I have to admit, it's difficult for me. I'm aware that I have a very strenuous relationship with power. And at the same time, I think just sitting in with the discomfort and like hearing your sharing is like a game changer. Like I've gone to other similar webinars, even like multiple sessions on like power, shadow power, but never really like felt like I can resonate with it. And I think especially your activities of like breathing and really getting into the zone, the different realms, has really helped. Hold on to that power that we have. And I have a question next, but I'll just keep it as a takeaway for now. But yeah, thank you, Jessie, for letting me have some time.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. What else is coming up for you all? Anyone else feel comfortable sharing? Either in the chat or coming off mute, but love to hear. Even to what Sinyi was saying about like, didn't really think about the embodiment practice of all of this. And even just like that question that you asked around like, what's a physical indicator that you're giving away your power? And I was like, oh shit. Like me personally, I was like, oh my gosh, like that is very real. Like a lot of stuff is coming up and I am looking forward to digging into that more. But Chris, I'd love to hear from you. Yeah. Talk to us.
I continue to be struck by the idea of the power of sensing and just how essential that is. So you mentioned that Larissa was a tracker, and I've seen Larissa track and see what she finds from these subtle little clues or marks. And to me, that's sort of a great metaphor for sensing in organizations. And so I find in my work as a consultant that so many leaders are so busy or so involved with themselves that they don't really pay attention to what's happening around them and pay attention to the humans who are sitting around them. And it just feels so important to be able to slow down and to really look and to notice what's going on. And you don't have to have all the answers, but I think being able to just mirror what you're seeing invites people into a conversation about what's really happening in the moment. And I know from my work with Larissa that oftentimes people don't really understand what's happening in the moment until they actually are invited to pause and think about it and explore it together. So I just want to give a thumbs up for that particular skill of power.
So awesome. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, even just like from a facilitator perspective, Larissa being like, this is a great time for us to breathe. I was like, whoo, isn't that right? Yes, powerful. Mary Ann, I think you had your hand up next. Would love to hear.
I was surprised by how I was able to sense in my body all through the presentation that there was such a tingling in my chest and in my throat, things that I'm not saying or things that I have wanted to say, but didn't have a way to express them before. And now just, really embracing the power of pausing and noticing, and how many people don't do that. And there's fear that drives so much of what people do in the workplace, that there's forgetting how human people are. I mean, the workplace is full of humans, and we all have the feelings, and just acknowledging and being aware.
Thanks so much, Marianne. So great. And Seema would love to hear from you.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I feel like I've been blessed to be exposed to some of Larissa's brilliance. And so this is such a delight to actually hear about your take on power, Larissa. And I guess I'm left feeling like equal parts delight and equal parts overwhelm. And I think, you know, as someone who has intentionally left a major institution, who has intentionally left the kind of hustle culture, who's intentionally stepped outside in order to like better my own personal well-being, in order to think about some of the notions of power that you've so beautifully illustrated, as someone that wants to still heal systems, but from the outside, while being cognizant of, you know, cultural notions of power that have been passed on in my DNA, of the impacts of capitalism and the impacts of colonialism on our own like individual well-beings, on the environment, on every facet of North American life, for sure. I mean, frankly, global. And I get excited by this reframe of power and just like this desire to share you know, these kinds of concepts with the whole damn world, because like obviously it starts with awareness, and then I feel I feel overwhelmed because those systems that are entrenched in so many of those, you know, negative shadow kinds of power, in particular organizational power, are just so entrenched and so pervasive. So that's where the contrast of feelings is for me.
So good. So well said. Thank you, Seema. Christy, like if you're up for it, we'd love to hear from you, but want to make sure we have time to get to questions, and definitely want to send it back to Sinyi too, because I know for sure she had a question. And anyone else, please start to ponder those things that you maybe are curious about. But Christy, tell us what's resonating for you. Oh wait, you're on mute.
I have an affirmation and then a segue perhaps to questions. The affirmation is just, oh my gosh, just everything you're saying. There's such depth to the language and the understanding, and it's amazing. I could listen to you for hours. In particular about the things that you've been saying around the body and noticing and finding power. And I'm a coach in the Silicon Valley. I work with a lot of, tech people, which means a high proportion of introverts. And I also see on this call, there's a large number of women. And I'm finding that you're describing a lot of powers that people aren't tapping into. And I love it. I want to just affirm, I've been talking with folks about something that I call like just being 10% bolder in tapping into their own power. And for those who don't have that charismatic personality of persuasion that we look to a lot, just seeing things like finding your own conviction, clarity and conviction, it's like a Jedi move, and so I just affirm everything you're talking about here, where there's so much power when people do pause, when they find that conviction, when they find the clarity, and then they express it in not your typical ways, but it has immense influence. And then my question is this: I see people leaning into their power by tapping into those things I just mentioned. And they may be more characteristic, quieter people or introverts and so on, and often could be conflict averse. And my question is this: when I've also observed that people who are in their shadow power in organizations, who tend to be about winning or losing, being right, making their point, winning the debate, I've found that for some of them, they can't hear some of these more subtle forms of power. It's like they only know a language that's about like a raised voice or an intensity and so any thoughts on, there is influence in that, other ways of exhibiting power, but I've also seen there's sometimes where you have to be able to create a sense of urgency or a sense of like you're meeting them where they're at in terms of some urgency, that so they can actually hear you. It's sort of that next level, and I'd love to hear any thoughts on that.
Thank you so much, Christy. And thank you, everyone who shared. Oh my gosh, I have many feelings getting to see friends and past colleagues and alumni and new faces. And that there's a way I'm also going to do my best to try to weave this with shares from other people. So your questions, and because what I had ringing in my ears is Chris talking about sensing power, and having had the joy of getting to work with Chris, and Chris is profoundly masterful at sensing, and every single heart-centered leader I know is masterful at sensing. Sensing is a capacity of the heart. It's a capacity of the heart. And it's also a capacity of embodiment. And so my whole career has really been exploring how to find common ground at work, that if we wish to create collective listening, it's often finding what are the types of things that we say we value. Because if we say this is our purpose, and if we say we value human beings, and if we say we want to make work more human, there's the integrity line. It's like, okay, because if you're in an organization where they're just like, profits first, it's just like, it is the clear commitment, it's like an organizational commitment to that posture. So, less workable situation is how I relate to that. So then if we're in an organization where it's like, oh, we do care about people, and also, as we all know, the business case for caring about people, P.S., it is wildly inefficient to operate from shadow power. Just hemorrhaging energy, hemorrhaging fear, hemorrhaging swirl, hemorrhaging people, lack of engagement, no retention, no safety. People might be feeling faster, but it's consumptive. It's actually a vampiric dynamic. So it's not a generative and regenerative dynamic. It is consumptive, and it's spiraling down. So it needs more inputs just from an energy frame. And then also on efficiency, an example, one of my executive clients who I worked with, who was one of the youngest ever Black women promoted to be a partner level at a nationally regarded law firm. When she learned the power framework and started understanding her own power pattern, she was like, I would estimate I spent 50% of my mental load being disoriented or strategizing or dealing with or not knowing how to react to shadow power. And that's pretty table stakes. We use so much energy harming ourselves, worrying about other people, digging on other people. And, it's just that's a lot. That's a lot of energy. What if we just got to reclaim some of that? So one, there's that. And two, the recognition in this full constellation, it's like a larger anatomy, because the mindset that has driven business to date often upholds certain types of power as power itself. And that's part of the illusion. That's part of the illusion. To say, oh no, that's not power, that's just decision-making power. And so, you know, one of the largest areas, one of the largest leverage points in this whole body of work is like, if you believe you're powerful, if you like completely throw away any concept of like, I don't have power, please, on behalf of like the entire life force, literally never allow that thought again in your being. And whatever your associations, when we focus on negative, you know, like harmful types of power as what power is, then we reject it. Then we don't want it. Then we self-sabotage. Then we like play a little smaller. Then we're like, call me if you need me. I'm just like over here. Instead of like, oh, hey, like I'm here to play. Let's play. So thank you. This is a many-faceted response. Part of the aspect of demonstrating the value of these many types of power must come with a purpose alignment from those who hold the most decision-making power. That's how this has to work. If you're working at a systemic level, when working at an individual level, every single individual can undertake this and then make the choice. Do I wish to stay in a system that operates in a certain way and potentially try to contribute to, generate, catalyze, or is this now an unworkable situation because I'm standing up for myself and I'm not going to take this ish anymore? Those are always the questions happening. And so the biggest lever of change is in the self. So personal well-being, that personal well-being sphere, this notion that I talk about, Seema and other people in wayfinding know, I talk about the word sovereignty a lot. And what I mean when I say sovereignty, I don't mean, you know, associations with crowns. I mean deep embodied knowing and responsibility for our power as creators. What am I creating with the life force moving through my being? Am I creating situations where I allow myself to operate under the illusion that my sensing is weakness or invaluable or like not valuable? That my caretaking is something that's just a nice to have on top of my role when it's actually a glue keeping the organization together and it should be valued. And that there are particular types of power in that constellation that have been and are repeatedly undervalued. And so the first step is, how do we value ourselves? And then how do we recognize, oh, wow, I don't need to be threatened by you being in your unique expression of power. I actually get to learn from you. You get to role model it for me. So part of the work of that simultaneous excitement and overwhelm that Seema said is like, facing the shadow can make us tremble. Facing the big scales of shadow can cause existential crisis. So then, and this is just, I just offer this as like, this is how I navigate. What helps me not go into like sensing overwhelm and existential crisis and like choosing the path of drinking poison because it seems hopeless is like, what can I tend in me and what can I contribute with those I touch directly? Because when we do that, when we tend our own ecosystem, which is not to say that the work of power is individualistic, it is actually inherently community-based. It is inherently community-based. It is a culture building skill, but we can start it with ourselves. So, sorry, sometimes the answers like can come long and passionate and move more poetic, but the data stacking out, it's like, if you can't convince someone on data of like, hey, like it's a waste of money to just be churning and burning on our people. Hey, it's a waste of money to keep pushing our people so hard and not listening to them. Hey, it's a waste of money to be cultivating a homogenous looking employee set and not have, like, not be a place that's inclusive. If that's not landing, you know, then you might be in a situation of we've just purpose washed ourselves and there's actually no will to change. And then you're just like, are we there? Are we there? Are we there? Go through your grief process of like, we're not there. Oh, we're not there. There's not will to change. Cut bait, job search. Versus like, do we have the skills, capacity, and courage to get there? Because also part of why people can't get there is because they're like, I don't know how to step out of my worldview. I don't know how to go from disconnection consciousness to like, oh yeah. So that can also be part of the tension, is just not knowing how.
Whoa, there's so much coming up. Even just like, even beyond,
Thank you. That was like a torrent of an answer, and that happens sometimes because, well, it can just happen. I do my best to try and be focused, and it's like, part of me doesn't want to apologize.
Do not.
Because what I want to give permission in you is the bursting soul cry that exists in your being that knows a better, more beautiful world is possible, and that it is like, we need not create so much harm, just period. Just like, what if we all committed to that? Ta-da! Like, what would happen? And what if we each committed to it in ourselves? And what if that was actually just how we worked? What if it was like, okay, like I inhabit power that serves the whole, and I inhabit shadow power, and like, we can like lovingly talk about it instead of being like, attack, like you're fired, like you have to leave. Like, so many things that happen are just these catastrophic atom bomb explosions of not understanding how the human shadow works. And that's really happening because the power of the sun, the like millions, I don't know how many millions of Earths that fit inside the magnitude of the sun, like that power is actually what's moving through us. And so as terrified as we can be of shadow power, we can get really brutally uncomfortable with how gorgeous we are, with how inspired we are, with how dedicated we are, with how much inspiration and possibility wants to howl and sing and operatically express through this tiny little animal body, that it feels like even the beauty is gonna like dematerialize us into air. Like that's actually like what I care more about in the power conversation, because it's the shadow power is important, but then like also part of why we look at shadow power instead of power that serves the whole is because it brings us to our knees and we start weeping and we long for it as much as we're so terrified of what it will ask us to become. Like that is what power actually is. Like you are a waterfall. Like the force, the gorgeous flow, the amount that wants to come through you, that tightness that we feel in our bodies from our intergenerational trauma, from our cultural programming, from our own lived experience, from the vast mystery that we have literally no explainable source to point to. Like all of this is so much to feel in this tiny little body. And so I even bow to you in this moment of expression of them. Thank you for undertaking the work of representing the life song at work, where you must interface with systems based on intellect and numbers and calculations, and to do the hard work of being a bridge between the poetic color burst and the form, because one's not better than the other. You know, the poetic thunderburst also is not better than the form. We're just learning how to get out of like constantly doing this. And so that's why, like, keep breathing, keep pausing, keep loving, keep coming together, because it's all too easy to just like look at the diagram. It's in here when we build the embodied capacity. Every martial arts practice, every wisdom tradition from around the entire world, no, this is what they work with, is how do we endeavor as like organic mortals to be as lit up as that image of the Singapore environment.
Larissa, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I want to honor and like start to wind us down here. I put a link to a spreadsheet in the chat. I'll share the link again here. But if you're interested in entering to have access to Larissa's course on different power types at work, please do that. We're going to randomly pick someone here in a moment. But whoa, I would love to just like, if you wouldn't mind taking like one minute, you know, we're always about like putting learning into action. What's like one thing that you can do to put some of this learning into action? So what's something that you can commit to? So maybe just take a moment, ponder, like, what is that thing? And if you'd be up for it, I love if you'd be willing to put that in the chat, but don't press enter yet. So put it in the chat. What's one thing you're committed to taking action on? Put it in the chat. Don't press enter.
And I'm going to give like handhold suggestions, because it might be like, what just happened? One suggestion could be noticing this way that I give my power away, and like building a habit around not doing it, or noticing a way I did that recently at work and naming it to a colleague and building like an accountability system to see like, hey, when you see me not do this, like, can you name that? When you see me close down in conflict, like, can you actually pause and check in with me? Because it's something I'm working on.
I love it. All right, when you have your thing in the chat, we're going to press enter on 3, and we're all just going to flood the chat with our things that we're taking away. So take like another couple seconds. What's the one thing you're putting into action? All right, and on 3, we're going to press enter. So ready, 1, 2, 3, enter. I love it. Going to take 20 minutes to reflect, learning about the different types of power. Naming that I give my power away, allowing myself to prioritize my own needs first, understanding the different types of power, step back, click up, and notice my own power habits. Yes, this is awesome. Okay, a couple of other like little things to mention. We right now, I think we're Culture Amp just had a conference called Culture First Global. We had Esther Perel come and speak, for those of you that know her. And so many things came up today that were reminding me of her talk around relational intelligence and like this idea of polarization and like it becomes complex because we project onto others, that what we like don't want to grapple within ourselves and create. And it just reminded me so much of like this power dynamic that we've been talking about all day. So if you're interested in accessing that, all the recordings are on Culture. It's under Culture First Global, Esther Perel. If you just like give that a Google, you can find it. But so much of that was coming up for me today. Another thing I wanted to share in the chat is Culture Amp just came out with this HR well-being checkup. So, our well-being is more important now than ever. And HR professionals, as we were talking about, are those caretakers and are constantly giving and supporting those individuals. So, this has been an amazing tool and like a self-assessment to understand just like, how am I doing? And a little brief moment of reflection if you're interested in taking that, but wanted to share that as a resource for you all. This session was recorded, so we'll make sure to send this out. Larissa, I think we're going to send the slides and things like that out as well. So we'll get that out later today. Let's see. Oh, and we have a book club tomorrow happening with Gary Ware on this book called The Playful Rebellion. So understanding how to maximize our team effectiveness through the power of play. So if that's of any interest, come join us tomorrow. But let's choose I know we're at time. Oh my gosh, this is like, what an experience.
I'll describe the thing that Jessie's picking as she figures out how she's going to pick. So this giveaway is for the yet to be released Power Assessment for Leaders experience that we are launching very soon at Wayfinding, which allows you to take a rich self-assessment about how you inhabit power that serves the whole and the 60 types of shadow power, because there are 2 for every type. And then lots of supportive information to go along with it. So drum roll.
Isn't this how do you do it? And someone may need to educate me. I thought I knew how to do this. And nope, is that not it? Oh no. What is the formula? Does anyone know? I feel so silly now. I thought I knew what I was doing.
You might need to use a number.
A number? Ooh.
Oh, like assign numbers to the thank you, whoever popped in and said that. Or was that Chini? Thank you.
10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
Yeah. And we'll be sending, in addition to the follow-up email, we can send links from Jessie and myself as well.
All right, let's see if I did this now. Equals random. So funny. This is not my skill set. All right, here we go. No? What am I doing wrong? Anyone know?
Since we have, it does not seem all names were listed. If you did not put your name in manually, then it's not up there. So you need to put your name to participate.
All right.
But I also have a proposal, Jessie.
Yeah.
Is that we can, the drama is high right now.
I know.
That we can also, I want to dispel pressure for you on like the technological front, because I personally wouldn't want that on my shoulders. We will randomly select someone. We will follow up after. How does that sound? Because we have everyone's emails from the registration. Yes, you do?
Yes, we do.
Perfect.
Oh my goodness.
Let's do that. We'll leave it as a cliffhanger so people can go into their evenings and or afternoons. Thank you all so much for coming and your participation, your witnessing, your sharing in chat, your voicing out loud. It was just really a delight to be with you.
This was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, and to Culture Amp for having me.
No, thank you. This has been awesome. All right, everyone. Cheers to co-creating a better world of work. Talk to you later.
Thank you all.